What's going on, everyone? It's Justin Spittler here, aka JSpit Trades, back at you with another video. If it's your first time on the channel, I want to welcome you to the channel. On this channel, I regularly post videos about the market, usually stocks. I'll mix up some crypto in there every once in a while. But today's video is all about semiconductors. We're going to talk Nvidia. We're going to talk SMCI. We'll also look at the semiconductor ETFs. And I have a bunch of individual semiconductor charts I want to share with you. And then at the end of this video, I'll tell you what I think is setting up in semis and what I think it means for the broader market, particularly the tech indexes such as the Qs and XLK. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing we're looking at here is Nvidia. So Nvidia is obviously the most important semiconductor stock. It's the largest semiconductor stock. It's also the leader within AI. So naturally, it gets a lot of attention. And I think when a lot of people want to get a sense of what's happening in the semiconductor space, they just go straight to Nvidia. And when you look at Nvidia's chart right here, it looks a little toppy. I'm not going to lie. So what do we have here? We have some sideways distribution, and we're below those short-term moving averages. I use the 10-day and the 21-day EMA. And so we're below those, and we close today down 2%, a little over 2%, heading into tomorrow's CPI print. And so, this looks a little concerning. We're still above this rising 50-day moving average, so all hope is not lost. There's a potential we come down there, test that, and that holds, and that could be, the potential bottom for Nvidia, or we could head lower. I think that's, what a lot of people are trying to get their heads around right now. But when you just go and look at this chart, and when you look at this super microcomputer chart, which is similar, it's easy to get bearish on semis. But you gotta zoom out, not just on the Nvidia chart, but you gotta zoom out and look at the entire semiconductor space and what's happening within the sector. So let's before we move on to some other charts, let's just look at the weekly view of Nvidia. So you can see here we have this huge base that Nvidia broke out of and went on that tremendous run. Really became the hottest stock in the entire market. And then what do we have? We had 3 weeks of declines, and now we're pulling back into this rising 10-week moving average, and we've dipped below it this week. And what's happened when we dip below it? Buyers have stepped in. So to me, this is an important indicator to watch for Nvidia going forward. And so far, we're holding it. So this is not an area that I would, particularly want to get bearish on Nvidia, because we are at a major support level that in the past we've known has had importance for Nvidia. You can see it clearly here when Nvidia was climbing out of this base. It's pretty obvious that the rising 10-week moving average sort of acted as a launch pad to help get it out of that base and really get moving. SMCI is another name that I think a lot of traders are going to look at and just get a negative view on semiconductors, because while this isn't as big of a semiconductor as Nvidia, it's super important in the sense that it's a leader. At one point, the super microcomputer was the hottest stock on the planet. I can't remember how much it went up year to date, but it was miles ahead of the index and miles ahead of even the semiconductor ETFs, and it just really blew away its competition and the rest of the market. But what's happened in super microcomputer the past few weeks, so we just had this sideways consolidation pattern, and you could make a pretty convincing argument that we have a head and shoulders pattern forming here. And to make matters worse, we're below short-term moving averages that are starting to flatten out and potentially roll over. So SMCI doesn't look great. The good news is we have pulled back into a rising 50-day moving average. We dipped below that today, but it held and we were able to close above it, indicating that some buyers are coming in and supporting SMCI at that level. So that's a positive for SMCI and otherwise, toppy looking chart. When we go over to the weekly, we can see that we are below this 10-week moving average. So that's a concern, but we've come back down and filled this gap here. And there is still potential for this weekly to get saved. So we'll have to see how SMCI and Nvidia finish the week, but I don't think they tell the whole picture of what's really happening within semiconductors right now. Even when we go and look at the semiconductor ETFs, we'll start with SMH, we can see that this looks pretty solid. So you can see after building out this initial base, we came back and built out a flag, ripped out of that, and then once we rip out to all-time highs, it was really no looking back until the past few weeks where what we've done. The rally has stopped, and we've just been trading sideways for several weeks in a row. The good news is that we're not showing signs of this rolling over yet. So heading into tomorrow's CPI print, this is up 0.7%, and we're also still above this rising 10-week moving average. So this still looks pretty solid to me. But SOXX, the other semiconductor ETF, looks even better. On a higher time frame, it looks pretty similar to the chart we just looked at, in the sense that we had this initial base, put in another base, broke out to all-time highs, and then was off to the races. What we have here, though, is a little bit more strength. So you can see that we've just been trading tight, really in a very, very narrow range the past several weeks in a row. And this rising 10-week moving average has caught up to it. And so we're no longer extended, in my opinion. And we also have this tight pattern forming. And because of that, I think the next move for SOXX would be higher, because when you have these tight consolidation patterns, they often resolve in one way or another. And in this case, the primary trend is higher. You can see we just broke out of a massive base here, and we've been climbing ever since. And the 10-week moving average has caught up to it, so it's no longer extended. And you can make an argument that this rising 10-week moving average could potentially serve as a launch pad for SOXX, which would be very bullish for the group. I think that goes without saying. Taiwan Semiconductor is another name that has me leaning bullish on semis. So this is a $750 billion company that makes the chips for Nvidia, AMD, and a whole bunch of other tech companies and semiconductor companies. And this is looking, really solid to me on a higher time frame. Hasn't, broken out and had the continuation above its former all-time highs that we've seen in some other charts already in this video. But it is still looking bullish. You can see we recently broke out to all-time highs, had the highest weekly close ever, and we've just pulled back and consolidated and built out a little base here. And now this rising 10-week moving average is coming up and acting as support. And Taiwan Semiconductor is actually showing a lot of relative strength this week. So it's up 2.9% heading into tomorrow's CPI print. And I think it closed up today about 1.8%. So it's setting up really nicely. And this is such a big, important company that if it breaks to the upside, it's going to move the entire space. It's going to move the industry ETF, so it's going to move SMCH and SOXX. It's that important. And also, if you want to think about it in a macro sense, there's very few companies that I think are as good of a risk-on gauge as Taiwan Semiconductor. Just because a lot of the world's most important chips, the world's most cutting-edge chips, are built by this company. So to see it doing well would be a huge plus for both the broader markets and more specifically semis. ASML is another really big, important semiconductor company that's a vital cog in this semi supply chain, and it looks even better. So in this case, we had the initial base, secondary base, broke out to all-time highs, and what have we done? We've just consolidated above those former all-time highs. Kind of had a little bit of a vertical accumulation here. It's been trading tight and sideways, but it's got a slight upward slope to it. And we have this rising 10-week moving average coming up and acting as support. So once again, this tight consolidation that we have in ASML will likely resolve in a big move one way or the other. And everything I'm looking at right here on this chart alone, and when you throw in what you're seeing in other semi stocks and ETFs, I think you have to believe that this resolves higher. So that would be a huge plus for the group, another super big, important company. And then we have a lot of other semiconductors that have broken out to new all-time highs, had a nice run, and they've just been consolidating and trading in a tight range. So this is another case where we have potential bull flag in the works, getting really tight in that rising 10-week moving average coming up to act as support. Lam Research, very similar setup here. Broke out to all-time highs, had a nice continuation, cooled off a little bit, and instead of having a deep, sharp pullback, what have we done? We just traded in this tight range for several weeks in a row, and now that rising 10-week moving average is coming up to act as support. Clack, another one, broke out of this big base, consolidated above the former all-time highs. That acted as a secondary base, then ripped And then the past several weeks in a row, we've just been trading tight. And now that 10-week moving average, what do you know? It's coming up and acting as support. And this is up 2%, 2.1% heading into tomorrow's CPI print. So you're starting to see, institutional positioning ahead of a big, important inflation report. And to me, that expresses conviction. So it's a big positive. Onto innovation, a name that doesn't get talked about as much, but it looks very similar to several of the charts we just ran through. It's a smaller semiconductor company. I think they're about a $6 or $7 billion company, but they've been a leader. There's no doubt about it. Since breaking out of the space here, has had a tremendous run, and it's just been trading tight several weeks in a row. And this is another one where it's been trading sideways more or less, but starting to bump up against the upper bounds of this tight range. So this one looks ripe for a breakout, in my opinion. Broadcom, another leader within this space. You can see the tremendous move that this one had after breaking out of the space here. It broke out, built another base, and then it's been grinding higher ever since. In the past several weeks, we've just been trading sideways, and what appears to be another bull flag forming here, and the rising 10-week moving average is right there to act as support. So, overall, this looks really, really constructive, and my money's on this, and along with basically every other name I've mentioned so far to ultimately resolve higher. I think semis are shaping up for a nice move here. So if your thing isn't buying the leaders, which is kind of what my specialty is, or my bread and butter is probably a better way of putting it. You may also want to look at some semiconductors that are starting to build out big bases and haven't had their big runs yet. Analog devices would be one of those. You can see it put in this base here, initially broke out, and then just went on to build out another pretty clean inverse head and shoulders pattern. And this one is starting to show some really good relative strength heading into tomorrow's CPI print, up 4.8% on the week already. And if the week were to close right now, this would be its highest weekly close ever. So that's a really, really constructive action in analog devices. Could be a new potential leader within the space if we do see some rotation within the group. Microchip technology incorporated is also setting up in a big way. You have bases on bases here. And if this breaks out to new highs here, I think this one could go on a nice run. Micron, I got this one included here. This one's kind of doing its own thing. I believe it reported earnings a little late, and so you could see the massive breakout that it had on volume here. This week it's down about 0.8%, but it also has just been on an absolute tear. It basically went from under $100 to almost 130 in the span of a few weeks. So I think this one's probably due for a little bit of consolidation sideways pattern, but make no mistake, this is a super bullish setup. And you might think I'd be saying that just because of what we're looking at on the screen right here, but you got to zoom out on this one. So zoom out on Micron and just look what it's done. So it actually broke out of a base that dates all the way back to the .com highs. You can see that this peaked in looks like the summer of 2000, and we're just now breaking out of that. So this is a major character change type move here. And while it might need a little bit of consolidation, I think Micron ultimately heads much, much higher in the coming months and likely years. This one looks like it's just entered a new secular bull market. So really exciting stuff for Micron. I don't own this yet, but it's a name I'm definitely keeping a super close eye on to see if I can, weasel my way into a position. Some other names to keep an eye on: Marvel Technology, a little bit of a laggard compared to some of the other names we've looked at, which have already, broken out to all-time highs, but constructive nonetheless. You can see got this base here, a secondary base here, and it's starting to get back on track, back above the 10-week moving average for the third week in a row. Or this week's not done, but if it were to close, the week were to close right now, it would be up above that 10-week moving average for 3 weeks in a row, which is really, really good stuff here. And I ultimately think this, breaks and retests those former highs up here. And that's about a 28% move from where we're at right now. So this could be a nice little trade. Definitely want to keep an eye on that one. And then last but not least, or maybe least, depending on how you look at it, we have AMD. So follow me on Twitter. AMD is a name I kind of pick on. I kind of, joke about it a lot. And I got nothing against the company or anything like that. But I just see AMD talked about, disproportionately relative to the strength of some of the other names within semis. I think Broadcom probably deserves some more spotlight. Lam Research, Applied Materials, Onto and Clack are really, really strong semi names. Even Micron, I don't think gets discussed as much as AMD. But AMD, still looks solid here on higher time frames. It, broke out to all-time highs like some of the other names we've discussed. But on its, attempt to bounce off these prior highs, it had a very short-lived rally. So you could see rally for a few weeks, then pulled back, and now it's back below its 10-week moving average. So if AMD is a name you're interested in trading or investing, I would maybe wait for it to reclaim this 10-week moving average, because you're starting to see a lot of other names in the space, flip back above their 10-week moving average, or they're just been their 10-week moving average has just caught up to where they're at right now. So they're on a relative basis stronger than AMD, which has just been a trickier, kind of wonkier name to trade. And as far as what this all means for the broader market, I think it's super bullish, and it's not a scenario that a lot of people are contemplating. I think when a lot of people look at XLK here, which is the main technology fund, they see a potential top forming, and there's no doubt that the momentum in XLK has slowed down as of late. And a big reason for that has just been the underperformance that we've been seeing in Apple, which is about 20%, maybe 23% of this fund. It used to be 23%. I don't know what it's at now, because Apple's been such a dog as of late, both on an absolute and relative basis. But it's really been weighing on XLK because it's such a big holding in the fund. So I think for XLK to get back on the right track, I think you're going to need to see a bottom in Apple. But if Apple continues to struggle, and maybe it or even has to trade sideways for a few weeks or months before heading higher, I don't think that's a reason to avoid tech stocks entirely, because when we look over here on the RSPT, this is the equal weight technology fund, you can see here that this looks like a lot of the semi charts we just looked at, in the sense that broke out to new all-time highs, had a nice run, and then it's just been consolidating, sort of correcting through time while that rising 10-week moving average comes and plays catch up. And now it's right there. And then we have this pivotal CPI report tomorrow, which I think a lot of people think is going to come in hot. But the way I look at it is how is positioning, what is positioning like ahead of this big event? And over the past several weeks, we've seen positioning kind of lean on the more bullish side, in my opinion, in terms of tech and growth. I think we're starting to see a lot of stuff set up. And then even today, the market was down. A lot of growth in tech stocks were getting hit. And then we had a strong close at the end of the day where names like Apple closed green, Google closed green. What else? I think even Tesla closed green. So we had a strong push towards the end of the day. And that was, that also included a lot of semiconductor names. So overall, I think the market is setting up for a decent move here. And, if that happens, if tech and semis, can get back on track here, I think that's going to be super bullish for the Qs. The Qs, which have a higher tech concentration than SPY, appear to be setting up in the same way a lot of names we looked at today are, where they had this big rally, trading several weeks tight in a row. And then now we're heading green on the week into a CPI report, not extended, but green. There was a strong push towards the end of the day to turn the Qs and SPY green. And, as we head into this pivotal event, Q has managed to get back above that rising 10-week moving average. Every time it's, dipped below that, buyers are stepping in. So when you look at the weight of the evidence and not just focus on a chart like Nvidia or XLK, which don't tell the whole picture, I think it's becomes easier and easier to entertain a bullish scenario. So that's sort of how I'm thinking about the markets right now. But that's it for the day's video. I hope you guys found this little presentation of mine informative, and I will be uploading another video soon. Talk to you soon.